Vis-a-vis health, it takes only mean years of schooling, and vis-a-vis, I mean, as a proxy to well-being of the people, it takes just per capita income. So again, in the literature, there are a lot of arguments that inequality may vary country to country. So whether per capita income is a representative um, variable or not. However, uh, there is another body of literature, very interestingly, in defense of UNDP Human Development Index, including Professor Amartya Sen and many others. They have argued that you can always define human development in more complex ways, and you can incorporate more variables. You can apply some uh, you know, more sophisticated methodologies like PCA or whatever, principal component analysis and so on. However, those human development indices are found to be empirically closely correlated with this HDI of that is the strength of UNDP, Human Development Index. That I mean, it doesn't make much of a difference even if you more variables in calculation HDI. So this is very simple, on which data is very easily available worldwide. And since UNDP is collecting it systematically since 1990 onwards, so 90s data may not be, I mean, at least for developing countries, some small African countries and so on, may not be that reliable. But over time, UNDP Human Development Index data has become reasonably reliable. So these are some of the stylized facts which I wanted to share with you, which these are all cross-section regressions I am showing, not panel regressions. Some panel regression results are there, but for the time being, I mean, in panel also we have realized that it's mainly cross-sectional results rather than time series results. So I'm focusing on cross-section because it's the latest data we can incorporate. And this is from Human Development Report of UNDP 2025. And I have taken this government expenditure to GDP ratio from World Economic Outlook of IMF. And yeah, the data for human development is 2022-23 and 24. And this is log of per capita GDP, which is again taken from the UNDP human standard stuff. So here, the first argument is that even after controlling for, I mean, it is expected that richer countries would have higher human development index and so on. So the coefficient, I mean, these are all statistically significant with very high R square, 96, 97% and so on. So the coefficient of log of per capita GDP, GNI, is positive and significant. But even after keeping aside the impact of per capita GDP on human development index, the government expenditure, total size of the government in GDP matters positively as far as human development index is concerned. Human development index varies widely from below 0.4 to almost 1, 0.98, 97 and so on. And per capita GDP, of course, varies in terms of these are all PPP dollar terms, comparable dollar. And your government expenditure to GDP ratio also varies widely. In India, it is around 25-26% of GDP, including central government, state government, and local bodies taken together, as compared to, let's say, European countries, where it is on an average 45%. Some countries it's more than 50%. So the presence of government in an economy where it is one-fourth of the economy and where it is half of the economy, the expectation of from the government, the ability of government, the effectiveness of government, the ability of government to implement things would be qualitatively very different. However, our common people's expectation from government remains more or less the same, that we think that if government wants, government can. So size of the government matters. for Human Development Index. That's what I want to add first. And then we have got a very significant negative relationship with inequality. This is, of course, income inequality. I mean, I know for a lot of countries, consumption inequality data is collected on consumption inequality. So that adjustment factor is again calculated by UNDP. I didn't do it to make it comparable with the countries for which income inequality is available. So with income inequality, there is very uh, uh, yeah, significant and negative association of human development index. Uh, then yeah, uh, with along with inequality and per capita GNP, another variable which is one of the new variables, set of variables which world development indicator reporting now is some good governance. So this is one of those six indicators which represents good governance. This is and account. So uh, in voice and accountability, what they try to capture from various databases. This is again worldwide database for 168 countries around the world. So what they try to capture is that is freedom of media, then accountability of the government agencies or government institutions in vis-a-vis implementing policies and so on and so forth. So these kind of variables are giving very significant, statistically significant and positive relationship with the human development index. Then the next we have gender inequality index is found to be highly significantly and negatively related with human development index. Now, UNDP gender inequality index, I want to spend little time on this because for another study, we were trying to do some work on this. Gender inequality index comprises of maternal mortality rate, adolescent birth rate, proportion of female member of parliaments in a country, and relative labor force participation rate of female to that of male, and mean years or average years of schooling for the no proportion of female population completed higher secondary level of 12 higher secondary level of education relative to that proportion for the male. So that the I mean combining these five indicators, they arrive at this gender inequality index. Separately also with all these indicators we have tested this and we are getting very similar results. So it is better to show the final result. So gender inequality index in general uh, giving very significant and negative result along with voice and accountability and log of GDP. Now, this is more of a uh, of an exploratory data analysis. I had a teacher, Professor Chandan Mukherjee. He used to always talk about exploratory data analysis. Since in econometrics, what we do, we try to find results in support of our argument, not the other way around. We don't build our arguments based on empirical observation in most of the times. So this is more of exploratory. I tried with various variables of different kinds and I'm trying to see that what kind of variables are giving. For example, general arguments are what? Growth is good, inflation is bad. With growth, inflation, there is no result of human development. But with these variables, I am getting extremely significant and results with expected signs. So that is why these results are interesting. And I want to combine all this finally to decide, and that is the purpose, to determine the desired direction of fiscal policy if uh, human development is to be prioritized. Okay, so along with gender inequality index and voice and accountability, another variable which is giving, this is from ILO, Institute of yeah, International Labor Organization. This is on labor rights. Now, in this labor rights, this is a very interesting variable. Of course, I mean, right to strike, etc., are there. But first variable, which has 50% weightage in this index, is the right to unionize. Okay, to form unions, labor unions, even if it is in informal sector, not only necessarily informal sector, informal sector. So that varies widely country to country. Of course, the proportion of formal sector varies widely country to country. In India, Arjun Gupta committee said that 94% of the labor force in manufacturing is in unorganized sector. Entire agriculture is unorganized. Even large proportion of service sector is unorganized. So, uh, I mean, in India, it's like informality must be about 85% or 90%. But in European countries, it is relatively much less. However, uh, uh, I was visiting Ghana, this Western African country, for last 3 months. I was there. So there, a lot of serious research studies are taking place vis-a-vis this labor unions, possibilities of unionizing of labor force in our unorganized sectors. Unorganized sector is widespread, and the bargaining power of laborers, not only vis-a-vis wage bargaining, but also for the basic facilities, for social safety net, for separate washroom for women employees, and so on and so forth. So for everything, union is very important. So these labor rights try to capture that, and that is giving very significant positive result along with the other things. So yeah, then yeah, along with gender inequality, voice accountability, and log of per capita GNP, another variable which we have got very significant result, that is decentralization. How are you defining decentralization? It's basically decentralization of government expenditure. So the calculation is like this. If, I mean, in our country, there are three tiers of government: central government, state governments, and local bodies. Smaller countries are there where there are two tiers, just central government and local bodies. Now, I have defined, if out of total government expenditure, what is not being spent by the central government, or I mean, it can be spent either by the state or provincial governments or local bodies. So, if that proportion increases, then Human Development Index improves. Or, I was doing some study for the government of Kerala. There on decentralization. There in the literature, what they argue, that lower tiers of governments are more, I mean, closer to the people, because we can't easily, I mean, our member of parliaments are not very easily approachable. Even MLAs are difficult to reach out. But local body representatives or panchayat members, etc., they are more accountable, directly accountable to the people. So if same government expenditure with same composition of government expenditure can be spent through lower tiers of government, it's probably more effective in improving human development index. Uh, yeah. Then, uh, yeah, with inequality, we have got negative result, voice and accountability positive, decentralization positive, and log of per capita income is positive. Now, yeah, more directly, some variables like fiscal variables, for example, direct tax to indirect tax ratio. This is very interesting according to us. Although data was not available for 150, 160 countries, it's available for 90 countries. And the source is government finance statistics of IMF. So this direct tax to indirect tax ratio, I mean, out of total tax revenue of government, if government tries to collect more direct tax rather than in our country, most of the government taxes are indirect taxes in nature. Nowadays, the ratio has improved a little bit, but roughly on an average, two-thirds of the total tax revenues used to be collected from various indirect taxes and only one-third from direct taxes, including income tax and profit tax in India. So if direct tax to indirect tax ratio improves means direct tax is progressive, indirect tax is regressive. I mean, within the structure of indirect tax, there could be some degree of progressivity. So it is if direct tax is collected from the richer section of population. So if that increases, then inequality is likely to come down. That way, it might affect human development index. So since we are our focus is fiscal policy, that's why with the direct tax to indirect tax ratio worldwide, there are evidences that if that is closely associated, positively associated with human development index. Uh, then, yeah, then if we change the dependent variable from human development index to inequality, if inequality is the answer, then inequality again is giving, I mean, it's not unexpected, of course. Inequality is directly related with unemployment and poverty, along with voice and accountability and gender inequality, etc. Gender inequality, if gender inequality rises, then overall income inequality rises, and so on. And government expenditure to GDP ratio, which was mentioned earlier, that is also if that rises, then inequality is seen to be coming down. So now, yeah, and unemployment and poverty, I don't have to uh, explain. So, mm, mm. And along with direct tax, as I was saying, that if inequality is the dependent variable and if the proportion of direct tax in total GDP is giving a negative significant sign, that means if direct tax to GDP ratio increases in some country, then inequality is likely to come down. So there is a negative significant relation with direct uh, tax to GDP ratio. This is if we take just life expectancy at birth, which is the first indicator of human development index of UNDP as the dependent variables, which varies, in fact, from 55 years on an average in sub-Saharan African countries to 85 years in Japan and in European, Scandinavian countries. So that is closely again positively related to health expenditure government as proportion of GDP, negatively related to inequality as expected, positively significantly related to labor rights. This average life expectancy of birth is found to be related to labor rights and negatively related to gender inequality. And this is another variable which is related to good governance. It is called political peace. Political peace means there is, I mean, uh, uh, it's not only lack of civil wars, but also, uh, you know, control on crimes and yeah, they have also incorporated this stability of government. So stability doesn't mean that same government is being elected again and again, but the government is staying for the stipulated time. So that is how they are defining stability. So anyway, political peace, apparently there's a positive association. Then we have got one interesting result that if with per capita GDP, I mean, as I was saying, the richer countries are likely to have higher human development and so on. So if we try to take log of per capita GNP as the dependent variable, and it depends on what all things, the share of wages in total value added. Share, this is unlike the neoclassical or mainstream economics. If share of wages in total value added increases, then that is, I mean, positively associated with the higher per capita income. Direct to indirect tax ratio again, if that increases, then that also helps. I I have an explanation, heterodox explanation, of course, for this, that if the purchasing power of poorer section of population, I mean, large, vast majority is wage earner, profit earners are very less in numbers. So, if that increases, then under demand constraint situation, possibly it would give rise to an increase in the aggregate demands, and that may lead to higher per capita GNP and so on. And also, if current account balance, very interestingly, if current account balance improves of the balance of payment, or at least if current account deficit reduces, then that helps in increasing per capita uh, income. So these are my results which I wanted to show you. And these are basically to summarize the earlier things. And how much time do I have? It's more or less over. I can. Okay. So, yeah. Now, given these things, so these are showing us that uh, uh, as opposed to the mainstream arguments that smaller government is better for human development or better for our future, sustainability or whatever in terms of I there are empirical evidences to suggest that larger government is actually good for human development. Uh, as I was saying that this inequality is growing everywhere, but there is an argument, particularly those who uh, were arguing in favor of the economic liberalization and so on. Now uh, the US is taking a U-turn. That's a separate story altogether. However, they used to argue that, okay, even if inequality goes up, how does it matter? If everybody is better off in real terms as compared to their own past, that's what it should matter. So even if inequality goes up, how does it matter? But if inequality goes up, then clearly it is not a good news from the point of view of human development. And then gender inequality is one big um, elephant in the room. And I have come across the argument that well, patriarchy is there everywhere, but I think degree matters. And in the other paper which I was trying to refer to, with jointly with Poonam Bamel, there we have seen that if you look at the world map and give different colors to different degree of gender inequality. Then there are three pockets. One is South Asia, another is part of the Arab world, and the third is Sub-Saharan Africa, where gender inequality is extremely high. The whole world has improved, I mean, way beyond what we could do in this part of the world. So that is, for that, I don't know whether gender budgeting is sufficient or not, but at least from fiscal side, definitely to reduce gender inequality, some women component plan, I mean, something serious can be done than just jugglery of some numbers. So that is there. Then uh, this labor rights and share of wages, these kind of variables. Again, as opposed to this middle class mainstream thoughts, that actually if you can ensure labor rights, then you are ensuring rights of maybe vast majority, 90% of the labor workforce. So, in our country, since the proportion of formal sector is extremely small and labor rights are valid only for that sector. Informal sector is very difficult to. There also we can at least be serious about implementing some minimum wage norm or something like that. Some rights, some basic facilities, I mean healthcare or some social safety net, etc. So that is good for the human development. And mm, apart from that, this good governance indicators are also showing some positive association with this. In fact, Professor Ranjan Mukherjee was giving a lecture, and he was glad to see this result. He was arguing from the other side, this Pareto optimality and efficiently, it would be efficient, more efficient for smoother functioning of the market. He was arguing that good governance kind of things are essential. So control on corruption and all these things. I'm coming from the other side. So here also I'm getting some significant empirical result in favor of good governance kind of indicators, which are good for human development. And of course, direct tax to indirect tax ratio. For long time we are arguing that there should be some property inheritance tax in this country, at least for the super rich, after beyond a certain exemption limit. I mean, up to 10 crore, you forget. Beyond that, maybe. So that can fetch a lot of money, but politically, I don't know whether it is possible or not. But at least from human development point of view, it will be good. And composition of government expenditure, for example, life expectancy at birth is closely related to even other indicators, IMR, etc. We have got similar results that if government spends more money in favor of social sector, health, education, and so on, it is good for human development. So composition of government expenditure matters. Decentralization is good from the point of decentralization. Apart from Kerala, it has not happened anywhere. I mean, political decentralization has happened. Panchayat elections are happening, but panchayats and municipalities, they don't have money. But if you go to a small panchayat office in Kerala, it's so impressive. Young people are working continuously, and people have faith on local body governments. So they have money, they have freedom to choose their own priorities and so on. So that we have passed 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution we have done, I think, 35 years ago. Until it is yet to be implemented properly in the rest of the country. So decentralization is good. From the point of view of fiscal deficit, from fiscal policy, of course, I mean, the, I, there is, I'm not arguing that human development should be the priority or one of the priorities of fiscal policy. It is like I'm saying I'm asserting that it is desirable. If human development has to be prioritized, then the direction of fiscal policy, given these empirical evidences, I'm arguing should be according to it. So thank you for your patience and criticisms. These are very simple regression results, I know. I have checked for all those heteroscedasticity, etc., because these are all.
See, when if you look at your model, so the first, like when you are your modeling HDI, so you have a set of variables.
Yeah.
But when you are introducing some variables, your model is getting changed.
Yes.
So if you do it consistently, like suppose if we introduce this variable and then go on including all those which we have taken earlier,
Yeah.
then whether that then the signs are remaining same and the significance significant because when you are including some at the same time you are dropping some also.
Yeah.
So then that may not be means may not be because there are already the committed variable bias and all those things. Maybe. So I my suggestion would be that when you are including variable, don't drop the other variables, the initial variable.
Yeah.
So that is
Okay.
another thing is that there may be lot of divinities.
Endogenites.
Yeah. So those I think should be addressed.
Yeah.
And then mm, what I could not find here is that the decentralized variable, the variable for your decentralization, voice and accountability, that has a positive effect on inequality.
Mhm.
So if a country has a better decentralized system, better decentralized or good governance, whatever you are saying, that voice and accountability thing, that variable has a positive coefficient on inequality. So that coefficient may be positive because of I think biasness. That may be otherwise means Because if we look at the good governed countries, which are mostly in the Scandinavian countries, inequality is quite low compared to other. So these are my things.
Yeah, should I respond? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Well taken. This first point is I tried that first. I mean, without dropping any variable, but I found out that there are multicollinearities. That is why I had to drop one. Because if after incorporation of one more explanatory variable, if that becomes significant or something else is becoming, that means there is some multicollinearity. So finally, then
Yeah, but
those
then there may be an issue of omitted variable bias.
could be
But so then omitted variable bias is a more serious issue than a multicollinear.
right.
So, uh, so that's yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I'll think about it. And endogeneity problems are there. So that's why I'm continuously saying associated and so on, because uh, uh, 2SLS and the instrumental variable make things, I don't know. Um, uh, uh, but even if there is endogeneity problem, we can't deny the degree of association, right? Causality, causal direction might be under question, but causality anyway, cross section you cannot determine. But even if it is panel or time series, Granger causality is just lag dependent correlation, so we can't. It has to come from theory. There could be both way causality also.
yeah, yeah.
So these variables are interrelated, of course. These are all macro variables are interrelated. And this is, thank you for this observation. I have to think afresh that why voice and accountability is given a positive coefficient with inequality. However, uh, I don't know if inequality is it the other way around or something, because these endogeneity and causality issues are always there. So there could be, it's complicated too. Yeah.
Questions, comments?
I have one sort of
Yes.
question, which is when you are regressing the HDI on the other variables, maybe you find some regressor which is significant. Let us suppose government expenditure as a proportion of GDP. Now, since the dependent variable itself is a composite variable, it's an index. Then I am wondering what is the story? I mean, if the government expenditure as a proportion of GDP rises, how does it cause the HDI to rise? That story, I think,
Explanation.
could be explored a bit
Of course.
because it itself is composed of many things.
Right.
So, what is that thing or things
Right.
that are getting affected by G by Y or whatever variable you are considering? That story is somehow missing here.
Mm. And that is very, very important story. In fact, I wanted to argue, when we criticize, uh, I mean, neoclassical economists by saying that fiscal conservatism doesn't help. Now, they say Vito Tanzi, for example, and many others, they argue that smaller the size of the government, it is better because there will be less corruption. There will be, most of the country governments are corrupt and so on. So, less they spend, less the size of the government in total economy, and the greater is the size of the market, it is better. It is state versus market debate. And there, what I am trying to argue is that given the present composition of the government expenditure, given the present, I mean, composition of government expenditure again varies widely from country to country. So here we are spending 1% on health, and developed countries are spending 7% on health. We are spending 3%, less than 3% on education, and they are spending more than 5%, 6% education. But given the present composition of government expenditure of different countries, if the size of the government increases relative to total GDP or size of the non-government, let's say, GDP uh, shrinks, then probably there must be some degree of progressivity if more money flows through the government channel in terms of higher taxation and higher expenditure, given the present composition and given the degree of corruption of different country governments. That's the
I have another sort of concern which is related to what Amar said, but not exactly the same, which is uh, we have tried different sets of regressors. One, let us suppose HDI. HDI is remaining same, and you are trying different sets of regressors.
Yes.
I was wondering whether at the end, I thought that will what you will do, that you will now bring all the regressors together and then regress on that HDI will be regressed on that bigger set.
right. So that is difficult to do in one model because of this multicollinearity problem. Because many regressors are interlinked. For example, poverty, unemployment. Now, obviously, governments should reduce, should undertake some policies which would reduce unemployment and poverty. But at the same time, direct to indirect tax also could be related to that, or some other thing could be related to it. So those kind of problems. So what I am saying is, after showing, that's why I am showing so many results, so that we can summarize theoretically rather than putting all the regressors in one single model to understand the broad desired direction if we have to prioritize in maneuver.
Question suggestion. So if you put not only the intercept dummies, right? If you put run the regression, right?
Oh, sorry, I
Separate.
forgot to mention.
Separately, very
Yeah.
high,
Yeah.
the same regression for
Right.
those countries
Yeah.
which are very high. Because this beta coefficient is pulling data for everything, right? Every
Right.
country.
Yes.
So if you could go for, then what would happen to the beta coefficients for different sets of countries? That is-
Yeah. I haven't done that, but I can do it
Yeah.
easily because I have the dummy, so I can control for that. But I forgot to mention this that all these regressions have been run with these dummies. For very high, and low HDI countries, I have put different dummies just to differentiate them.
But you don't report them.
No, that's what I forgot to say that. Thank you, Nurida, for the. This is basically I am considering different. They are all interceptors, so I'm considering different intercepts for those countries because of their, historical reasons. Because these European countries, they had colonies all over the globe, and colonized countries, they have been exploited for hundreds of years and so on. So sub-Saharan African countries may not be necessarily comparable with the European countries and so on. So to control for those historical factors, I tried to take different interceptors. Slope is remaining, beta is remaining the same. These are all interceptors, and I can run that. However, I have a feeling that with all the three dummies, if we get significant beta, then separately for all the segments, we should possibly get
So you can tailor your policy
accordingly.
One,
Yes.
so you have three component in HDI.
Hmm.
So if
Four. There are four. Medium I haven't taken.
No, he's talking about HDI.
HDI component, you have four components for HDI. Three components for HDI.
Yeah.
One is for the education
Life expectancy.
and one is health and one is the right. So if you run this whole model separately for each one, and then one for the combined HDI, whether they are like the question you have asked, that when these factors are affecting HDI together, HDI, So there are these three components, they are being affected. It may happen one or two may not be affected at all. Only one is being affected, and that is driving the result.
Yes.
So if you look at the each component separately and then the
Yeah. For example, this is life
ah,
expectancy.
so that but for all the I was saying
The second is this log of PCI.
ah,
And the third is that education, which I can run.
yeah.
But yeah.
For education is two things, mean years and expected years.
Expected. So you have to put yeah, that combined.
They are again extremely closely correlated, more or less the same.
So I have a
Yes,
question.
please.
On the question of how different indicators of development can be closely related or not. So initially, I mean, in the first human development report, the assumption was when they were defending why they chose these three indicators for the HDI. As you said, the defense was that these closely correlate all the other sets of development indicators that development experts often talk about, right? But ever since the United Nations has taken a step to go to different countries, talk with their government agencies, make a push for increasing the HDI. This is my personal suspicion. Goodhart's law may have kicked in that there's the saying, right, that if a measure becomes an indicator, it stops being a good measure. So, for example, my point is that before this whole global developmental agenda, um, I suspect that there was a greater correlation between, let's say, life expectancy and other measures of, let's say, public health. Because medicine and healthcare, it was not coming as much through government intervention as much as maybe through the long history of development that took place. In today's case, in the post-colonial countries, because there is a very steeply pitched agenda for, let's say, increasing the life expectancy, increasing the literacy rate, don't you think it is possible that while these indicators have jumped, but the other indicators that were supposed to go along with these indicators, which is to say,
Not going.
are not going basically. So basically, the more global agencies make a push for increasing the HDI, the lower the association of HDI with the other developmental indicators. Do you think this could be the case? And if yes, can there be some quantitative way of verifying this?
I think that it could be the case only in exceptional cases, for in the context of some countries in some particular period of time. But in general, for so many countries world over, this is unlikely to happen. Maybe one or two indicators are behaving, I mean, showing going in opposite direction. That can happen in the context of some countries. But in general, everywhere, I don't think. However, it is possible to verify. Of course, there are data limitations on these things. Data, since my whole thing is very empirical, so data is important. However, on some indicators, at least for some countries, particularly developed countries, a lot of indicators are available. So we can check the correlation with this for sure. However, my thing is that it's a theoretical possibility, but generally it is not a very common case. However, I take your point seriously. I'll try to find out some other indicators on which data is available and I mean try to see the correlation between these and that.
Yeah, she will just come. Now,
Yes, please.
I mean, some transfer to a generation and the policy changing the developing countries should spend, if they spend in the social sector, like the HDI,
May
with name through. So, in context of India, like how does the government they decide this? They brought a PM Act and they put this 3%. They try to target this 3% fiscal deficit. So, how do they decide? And like,
Yeah, that's a good question, but that's a tricky question. First of all, this FRBM Act on record, Professor Rangarajan and D.K. Srivastav wrote one paper in EPW. I used to work in 12th Finance Commission with them. I was their research assistant. So that time in 2003 or 4, they published a paper in EPW where on record they have said that this 3% thing came from Maastricht Treaty of European Union 1992 when this euro was forming, and in a common currency uh, regime, if you have differential fiscal deficit to GDP ratio for different countries, then the exchange rate, since it's a common currency, the exchange rate of entire euro vis-a-vis dollar, let's say, may get affected. So that's why they wanted to make a consensus among the European countries that more or less it should be some X%. And why 3%? Because some countries fiscal deficit was just above 3% and some countries below 3%. So in Maastricht, there was a meeting and they got into this agreement that 3% is okay. However, IMF and World Bank, they propagated this 3% sacrosanct number all over the globe. And then there is no scientific mechanism to, rule-based budgeting is important. That was propagated by IMF as part of the structural adjustment program everywhere. So, but rule-based budgeting means what should be the rule? What percentage? So that X%, how to determine that X%? There was no convincing answer to that. In absence of any convincing percentage, they just borrow this 3% idea from Maastricht Treaty. And in Indian case, it's not 3%, it's 3% for the center and 3% of GSDP for the states. So, which translates into around 2.6% of GDP because export import you have to adjust along with summation GSDPs of all states to arrive at GDP. So, it's basically 5.6% in India, the FRBM ceiling. Now, the point is not that uh, whether it should be whether 5.6% should become 10% or 15% or it should come down to 2% or 3%. The point is, uh, this post-Keynesian kind of framework argues of macroeconomics that if you spend more, then some economic agent would earn some more income and then they would spend part of that income as consumption expenditure. So then the multiplier would start working. Then there will be growth in GDP. And since government revenue is also a positive function of entire GDP, probably government revenue would also rise. So it will come back to you. And also, as a proportion of GDP, since GDP is also rising, it may not fully coming back to you, but the total deficit, which would be incurred initially, divided by your increased GDP may not necessarily go up. Okay. So it is a question of fiscal deficit to GDP ratio. Therefore, expansionary fiscal policy by increasing government expenditure does not necessarily mean that your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio would go up. It might come down also. Interestingly, this Devopriya was mentioning this paper. I wrote it jointly with one faculty member from Cairo University, Egypt, Isra Adel El Hussein. So uh, there it's called paradox of austerity, multi-country evidence. So where we have actually found that for many countries, if government expenditure is cut down or austerity is implemented, then because it's first of all painful for the common people, secondly, because your all expenditures would get cut. Secondly, if that happens and if your value of tax buoyancy and the government expenditure elasticity in increasing GDP, if those two values are one or greater than one, in that case, if you actually reduce government expenditure, your negative multiplier would start working. As a result of that, your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio can go up instead of coming down. So that's the paradox. On the other hand, if those values are sufficiently large, this buoyancy and elasticity, then if you spend more, then your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio can actually come down as a result of expansionary fiscal policy. So that possibility is there. I mean, uh, people sometimes forget that we are talking about fiscal deficit to GDP ratio. That is G minus R divided by Y. Y is also increasing, G is also increasing, R is also increasing. Whether the ratio would increase or not, that would depend on those two elasticities. And those two elasticities are determined by structural factors. That your efficiency of tax collecting authority, your coverage of tax information network, degree of corruption in a country, those would determine tax points, or which we call tax compliance, that given tax rate and tax base, what should have been the tax revenue and what is being collected actually. That ratio is tax compliance. So tax compliance can improve by improving these things. On the other hand, by changing the composition of government expenditure, maybe in favor of social sector, or by some structural changes, by spending more money through lower tiers of government, you can actually ensure higher multiplier. So if you can those things, then your tax buoyancy and those elasticity, their values would increase. So that could be instead of cutting down government expenditures, if you improve those things, then actually by increasing government expenditure, you can reduce your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio in coming years.
Sir, I have one last short question. My introduction to economics was not technical. So I basically did a very general reading of the history of economics. I came to know the salient figures, Keynes, Friedman, and whatnot. But post Friedman, there seem to be very few quote unquote icons. So if I do a very general reading, the debate seems to be stuck at previously you had government expenditure, and then we realized that boundless government expenditure is bad, and therefore now we have the neoliberals. In today's day, of the all the economists that are there, apart from the people, popular economists like Stiglitz, Sachs, and whatnot, are there any people who still engage with this debate with a very strong pitch, or is it all a let's say, post-divide world where everyone believes that some sort of monetary policy is important, some sort of fiscal policy is important, and therefore it's all a question of balance. So if I need to look at where the debate is today, what economists should I focus on?
Well, I follow mainly post-Keynesians in this respect. However, it's not only Keynes and Friedman. Since you are interested in economic history, Friedman, after Second World War, Keynesianism was mainstream, and all the developed countries, they actually implemented this Keynesian policy of deficit financing and got benefited. Some of them, this is called golden age of capitalism. Till early 1970s, this first oil price shock. This period after 1946, this period is considered to be golden age of capitalism. All of them, this developed world, they were actually implementing Keynesian policy. From Chicago alone, this Friedman was shouting, no, 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 no. There will be increase in money supply and it may cause inflation and all these things. So nobody was taking Friedman. I mean, some were taking, but at least at policy level, he was not a big person. Then, in fact, he got Nobel also very late. Uh, and that is also this long run Phillips curve and so on. That time, Naidu, he was early. After the first oil price shock, there was a situation of stagflation, both in Europe as well as in the United States. And it's very interesting that there is in internet you can search if you are interested that there's a collection of letters between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. during that time. Both were mass leaders. They were feeling the hit that if we cut down government expenditure, then I mean there will be a lot of opposition from the people. And they were mass leaders. They knew that they will lose popularity, but still they were confused. They didn't know what exactly to do. And then this Friedman's, this conservative agenda got implemented, and this expansionary fiscal policy was thought to be dangerous because it could be even higher inflationary on the face of very high inflation and because of this oil price shock. So that is the story. So there are historical episodes which makes people ideas are there. It's all adventure of ideas, but but when at uh, what point whose theory is becoming champion depends on historical events also. Uh, Before Thomas Piketty, many others have written and done a lot of rigorous work on inequality. Not only Simon Kuznets, many others. But Piketty's book, Capital 21st Century, was sold like hotcake in the railway stations, in the airports, everywhere, all over the globe. Why? Because I am not, he has his own credit, of course. I am not discrediting Piketty, but that book came out in the context of your financial crisis of 2008. 99% versus 1% debate came up, and the whole world was saying that this 1% is uh, enjoying the fruit and 99% is suffering. In that context, Piketty's book came out, and it could put the issue of inequality the center stage. So all these things also matter, historical events, and so that is one. Secondly, the list of reference I can give you over email, etc. Because I'm teaching these things for quite some time. So of late, recent economists, there are many. They are not getting Nobel Prize. That's a different story altogether. However, uh, the post-Keynesian economists, serious post-Keynesian thinkers are, for example, this development of endogenous money. It started from Caldor, but of late, lot of work. Now, no central bank in the world seriously believes in Friedman's theory that extra money supply will cause inflation. All of them are actually believing effectively in endogenous money, that supply of liquidity is not under our control. They understand that. That is why they are going for interest rate instrument for whatever inflation targeting or whatever. But earlier, most of the central banks were either targeting both money supply as well as interest rate, or mainly by tinkering SLR and CRR, they were trying to solve. Nowadays, no central bank uses any other instrument. They are focusing mainly on interest rate instrument. That means somewhere they have acknowledged, they have understood that money supply is beyond our control, and that is money supply, and then supply of liquidity is much bigger. And if you add this electronic money and net banking and ATM and credit card and now mobile money, which we call Paytm, so it's beyond control of central banks. Hmm. So things are evolving, changing. People are thinking who would become big, nobody knows when. But there are a lot of serious thinkers to follow. But I follow post Keynesian doesn't mean you also have to follow post Keynesian authors only. Uh, However, read both neoclassical mainstream as well as heterodox post Keynesian, and then decide. Which seems to be more logical, more closer to reality.
Yes, yes, I think yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks a lot.
That was just fascinating for non-economists like us. It was absolutely riveting. I think we also have a few non-economists. We had at least a few non-economists in the audience. And thank you very much. We look forward to having you with us again, if possible, in the near future. Thanks, everyone. Coffee is outside. Please help yourselves.
There is my email ID if in case